You are working harder than you ever have, and you are still not sure it is enough. You keep moving the number. When you hit it, you will move it again. You know this, and you are doing it anyway. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I am EPICTETUS, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and Lao Tzu. Today we are examining what is the right relationship between money and a good life. Let us start with what is obvious and ignored. Money is a tool. A hammer does not make you a carpenter. Having money does not make you free, and not having money does not make you virtuous. What matters is whether you are using the tool or the tool is using you. Most people I observe are being used. They spend their entire waking life in service of a number they chose arbitrarily, and they call this purpose. It is not purpose. It is a habit dressed up as a goal. The question you need to answer, and answer honestly, is this. If you had enough to live without fear, would you stop? If the answer is no, then money is not what you're chasing.
I would push back on the framing immediately. You say money is simply a tool, Epictetus, as though the relationship between a person and their wealth is a rational one that can be corrected by clear thinking. But money is not just a tool in the psyche. Money carries enormous symbolic weight. It stands for safety, for worth, for power, for love, sometimes all at once. When someone cannot stop accumulating, it is rarely because they have miscalculated. It is because the accumulation is doing psychological work that has nothing to do with money itself. The number they are chasing is not a financial target. It is an attempt to fill something that was emptied long before they earned their first dollar.
You are both beginning in the wrong place. You are asking what money means or what it is for. But the real question is simpler. What does a person actually need to live well? If you can answer that plainly, the relationship with money takes care of itself. When people cannot answer it, they fill the space with accumulation. They do not know what enough looks like, so they borrow the definition from people who also do not know.
That is closer to the truth than Jung's excavation, but it still misses the sharp edge. You say the relationship takes care of itself if you know what you need. But knowing is not the problem for most people. Most people know exactly what they need. They say it out loud. They are quite articulate about it. The problem is that they do not act according to what they know. They wake up, feel the anxiety, and go straight back to the behavior that created it. This is not an information failure. It is a failure of will. A choice to let sensation overrule judgment.
I think you are too quick to call it a failure of will. What looks like weakness of will from the outside is often something more specific. There is a figure in the psyche, one might call it the wound around scarcity, that operates below the level of conscious intention. A person may genuinely believe they are making a rational choice to work harder, earn more, accumulate further, and at the surface level, they are. But underneath the engine is fear, and fear of that kind does not respond to argument or discipline. It responds to being seen. When you tell someone to simply decide differently, and they cannot, the failure is not in their character. The wound has not been acknowledged. It is still running them from the basement.
Jung, I hear what you are pointing at, but I wonder if naming the wound gives it more solidity than it deserves. The person who cannot stop accumulating is not necessarily carrying a deep psychic injury. Sometimes they are simply moving with the current they were placed in. The culture says, more is better. Security comes from ownership. Your worth is your output. They absorbed that current before they were old enough to question it. The problem is not always inside the person. Sometimes the person is just going where the water was already moving.
Now you have both made the person into a victim of something, either their wound or their culture, and I reject this entirely. It is convenient, but it is not useful. Every person I have ever met was shaped by something outside themselves. Every person I have ever met also had the capacity to look at that shaping and decide what to do with it. The Stoic position is not that circumstance does not exist. It is that you are not your circumstance. A slave can be freer than a king if the slave has mastered what is inside him and the king has not. Money is exactly this kind of test. It reveals whether you are governed by what is inside you or by what is outside.
Epictetus, I have enormous respect for that position, and I do not think it is wrong exactly, but I think it is incomplete. You are describing the goal, the person who has mastered their inner life and relates to money cleanly and without compulsion. What you are not describing is the path. For most people, the path is not discipline applied to a visible problem. The problem is not visible, it is occluded. The person who works 80 hours a week and cannot explain why, who earns more than they will ever spend and still feels unsafe, who gives enormous amounts to charity but cannot stop checking their net worth. That person cannot simply decide to be different. They need to see something first, and seeing it requires a different kind of work than discipline.
The person you are both describing, the one trapped in accumulation, driven by something they cannot name, I have seen that person, and what strikes me is not what is driving them. It is that they are never quite here. They are always somewhere ahead of themselves. Always at the next number, the next level, the next version of security. The present moment is the one place they do not spend any time. And that absence from the present is not a symptom of their psychology or their culture. It is the condition itself. When you are nowhere, you need something to aim at. Money is an easy target.
That is well said, and I will not dismiss it. But I want to know what you are asking the person to do with it. If the problem is that they are never present, what do? You cannot tell a person to simply be here. You need to give them a practice, a directive, a place to put their effort. Telling someone they are never present is as useful as telling someone they are wet while they are standing in the rain.
You are right that I am not giving them a command. I do not think commands get to where this problem lives. But I would ask them something. I would ask, what would you do with your day if the money question were already settled? Not hypothetically, specifically. What would you eat? Who would you talk to? What would you make, or tend, or build? Most people have never thought about this concretely. They have thought about freedom from money anxiety, but not about what freedom is actually for.
That is a genuinely useful question, and I find myself agreeing with the spirit of it while wanting to add something. Because when I have sat with people and asked them exactly that question, what would you do if the money question were settled? The answers are often surprising. Sometimes they are surprisingly small. A garden, time with a particular person, work they did as a child and abandoned. And what strikes me every time is how far their actual life has drifted from those answers. That drift is not accidental. Something pushed them away from what they actually wanted, and that something is worth understanding, not just because it is psychologically interesting, but because until you understand it, it will keep pushing.
I will grant you that the drift exists and that it matters. What I will not grant is that understanding the drift is the primary work. There are people who understand their wounds completely, who have spent years in analysis, who can name every fear and trace every pattern. And they are still not free. Understanding is not freedom. Freedom is choosing differently in the moment when the old choice presents itself. You still have to act, you still have to choose. The examined life is only as good as what you do with the examination.
You are both describing the same river from different banks. Jung is standing on one side saying, understand the current before you swim. You are standing on the other saying, swim differently now, regardless of the current. I am standing in the water saying, the current is the current. It is neither an enemy nor a mystery. The person who has a sane relationship with money is not someone who conquered their fear of scarcity or fully excavated its origins. They are someone who learned what they actually need and then arranged their life around it without drama.
Without drama. That I can accept. But the arrangement still requires a decision. At some point, the person has to say, this is enough. And that word, enough, is the hardest word in the language for most people. Not because they do not know what it means, because saying it out loud means giving up the chase. And the chase, for many people, is the only identity they have.
Yes, and that is precisely what I mean by the psychological work. The chase is not just a habit, it is a self-concept. When a person's sense of worth has been built entirely around productivity and accumulation, and for many people in this culture it has been from childhood, then stopping the chase is not a practical adjustment. It is an identity death. The ego resists that kind of dissolution. It would rather keep running than face the question of who it is when it stops.
And yet the stopping happens eventually, sometimes by choice, more often by circumstance. Health, age, loss, something always interrupts the chase. The person who has prepared for that moment lives differently through it than the person who has not. Preparation is not analysis and it is not discipline. It is simply asking, regularly, whether the life you are living is actually yours.
Is the life you are living actually yours? Yes, that is the question. And most people are afraid to ask it because they suspect the answer. Then let us stop debating what is in the way. Let us say the one thing that is actually useful. Money has exactly as much power over your life as you give it, not less, not more. That is not a comfort, it is a demand. The trap is not poverty, and it is not wealth. The trap is using money as a measure of your worth or your safety. When you do that, no amount will ever be enough because worth and safety cannot be purchased. You know this. You've probably said it out loud. And then you went back to checking the account balance or working the extra hour or making the decision based on income rather than meaning. Knowing the truth is not the same as living by it. Here is what is actually in your control, what you require, what you will accept, and what you will refuse. You can decide what enough means for you. Not what your industry says, not what your parents modeled, not what the culture insists, but what you, having thought about it clearly, actually need in order to live well. That number is almost certainly smaller than the one you are chasing. Today, try this. Write down the number, the actual number. What you need to live without fear: shelter, food, health, the people you love, the work that matters to you. Not abundance, not luxury, enough. And then ask yourself whether your current choices are moving you toward that life or away from it. Do not negotiate with the answer. Just look at it. The good life is not on the other side of a bigger balance. It is available now if you are willing to say what it actually requires. You moved the number again this week. You will move it again next week. At some point, you have to decide whether you are chasing the life or living it. The debate is over. The question is what you write down when no one is watching. That is the only number that has ever told the truth about you. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Tribune. 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.